Hi there, my name is Ulrich, aka DayMusic or the Pawn Spectre, and we're here today again with another request for a tutorial on ZGameEditor Visualizer as part of my tutorial series that I've been running on my channel, which I guess is going to be more of a frequent thing. Today someone wanted to know more about the transition effects effect that comes as part of ZGameEditor Visualizer. So see, I have here my ZGE Viz with a background image loaded in with using a HUD image layer. It doesn't really matter which one you use, I just like using the HUD image layer. So I'm going to close that real quick, and I'm going to load in the transition effects, which is under the post-process category. Right here, transition effects. I missed transition effects. There you go. And you can see that the first thing that you'll notice when you load it in like this, just over the background image, no grouping or anything, is it's trying to transition between the background image and a blank image. That is because when you're using the transition effects, it is a post-process effect, so it's working over your background layer. And you want to load in an image as your image source. So I have some other pictures here that I decided to use. I'm gonna go ahead and use this one. These are all the pictures that I could find quickly that are 1920 by 1080 aspect ratio, which is your general aspect ratio for videos nowadays. I'll show you what happens if you load an image that isn't 1920 by 1080 or 16 by 9, otherwise 16 by 9 aspect ratio, and how you can do, or what you can do to fix that if you want to use a non-standard aspect ratio for an image. But right now, so you see I have an image loaded in the transition effects image source, and now whenever I move the transition slider, you see that it is transitioning between the two pictures. Now if you wanted to automate this, of course you would bring up your FL Studio playlist, and then you would select the part that you want it to be automated to. And I just have a little loop in the playlist here loaded in, so we can have something to listen to while I'm messing around with this. That way it's a simple drum loop so that we can look at the timing as well. So if I were to move this all the way to the left, right click, press A to create an automation clip. And then if I were to move it like this, or actually here, something like this. No, not like that. There you go. We have a simple transition here. And there you go. That is how you create a simple transition between two images using the transition effects. But what if you wanted to do something more complicated? For example, what if you wanted to reuse the transition effects to transition between different images? Well, you could still use just this setup here of a background layer and a transition effects layer. But if you wanted to, if you had like other things happening, for example, if you had like this thing happening, if you had a peak effects asset happening or whatever, and you didn't want, I mean, I guess it doesn't really affect that anyways, it just happens in the background. But if you wanted to group it together, you could also make sure that you have it in a buffer layer and then have all of this happening in your output behind whatever layers that you want, so that none of that stuff's getting in the way of your transition effects. So that, yeah, you can have that grouped in like that if you wanted to. And we're just gonna keep it, simple. We're gonna get rid of this, and we're just gonna leave it like this, these two pictures. So what if you wanted to reuse this? Let's say you wanted to transition from this image to this image, then from this image to your next image. Like let's say you just want to make a full like slideshow in FL Studio, What you would do is you would actually, you can right click the image source of most layers, I believe most effect layers in ZGameEditor Visualizer, and you can create automation clips with them. The problem with that is that the increments for them are very minuscule. So what we're going to do is, this is the transition layer, which I will rename this real quick. I'll just call that transition, I guess. And then what we're going to do here is, with that selection highlighted still, we're going to right click the background image, or the image source for the background layer, create automation clip. And then, am I in front of the thing? I am. And then we're going to right click the image source for the transition effects and create an automation clip. So you see right now, these don't look very different, even though we know for a fact those are two different images. What we're going to want to do actually is right click the final point right here, set them to hold, and you will see actually if I copy, hang on, that is the transition effects custom layer, custom image index. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to copy this real quick. I'm going to show you that if I copy this point, paste it in this point, you'll see that now the starting image is the image that we end on. So it may not have even looked like anything changed, and that's probably because, I mean, it did probably change. It is just very difficult to see what these numbers are. So if you're wanting to automate the image source of any of these layers, I recommend not even trying to find them using this method, because chances are you won't be able to. What you would want to do is set your image for the layer first, right click, copy the value, then wherever you want that image to show up, you would right click that point and then paste value right here, or press V to paste the value. And of course, that's probably pretty standard, but what you would want to do if you wanted to make a slideshow effect, let's say I wanted each measure, I wanted each measure a new image to be transitioned, right? So let's see. Something like that, but maybe every couple measures, every 8 beats, I want there to be a new image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up like this real quick. And then for the reset, since it starts at the bottom and then the transition happens as it progresses through the automation clip, you're just going to want to go like this. You set that to hold if you want, but you don't really need to. As long as it's at the same spot as the other point, it's going to be an instant move. And then we're just going to keep doing that. We're going to go like that, go like this, like that, set that to smooth. Or as a matter of fact, I don't even need to do that. I can just go like this. There. And then we're going to copy this over like this. There. So that is your very basic like move. So we're going to see when I go like this. And of course, right now it's resetting back to the first image. Because what we want to do is for our custom image, or our background image, we want our background image to start on this space image, right? Then we want it to turn into the one that it turned into of this cute furry Toucans character, which I've never read the comics and I forget her name, but I should know her name because I've seen her a lot in her art, or in, I guess, the art of the comic. We're going to switch to that image. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the image in the layer, in the image source of the background layer, right click, copy, and then just to make sure, we're going to hold shift and right click in that spot so we can just make sure that it stays in that spot. Right click the new point we just created, set it to hold, right click the point, paste the position of the image we just copied, and you'll see now, actually I think we need to do it at the end one as well. No, there we go. So we have that one going the way that that is. As soon as the transition point reaches the end, we've already reached the new image, and then when it resets, we've set the background to the new image. And then if we want to continue with the slideshow, since we've already reset these transition effects transition point to the start, we can actually change the image of this one again. So we're going to select the next image, and we're going to go ahead and set that right here as well. Or if you wanted to, just to make sure, you could set that like, I don't know, right here, just to make sure there's no like errors or anything. Like, cause I don't know, sometimes FL Studio's automation clips aren't the most accurate, even though like you see all of these happen at the same time, but sometimes there's a chance that it'll get like a little flickering of things not happening when you want it to, which it looks like we're fine right now. So if you want to put it right on it, you could, but since there's nothing happening like in between this area, you could just set the point, whatever. You could just set the point right there in the center, whichever one you prefer. I'm just gonna put it right there so we know what we're doing. And then let's just go ahead and set all of these. So right now we have it set to switch to this image. Then we're gonna switch to, I have some videos loaded in as well. So we're gonna switch to this one. Remember, set the image first, right click, copy the value of the position of that image, and then paste that where you want that to be. Make sure you're on hold for all of these automation clips. And then I have one more right here at the bottom, copy, paste, and then you know what, just for the heck of it, just to have one more, let's go ahead and say that we're going to end right back where we started. Okay, and then I guess I got to make sure that the background image is also following suit to the transition effects that we just did. So let me set that up real quick. All right, there we go. That was a bit more confusing than I intended that to be. But so you see, if I press start here, I'm going to cycle through all of the images and videos that I have loaded in, just so you can see that it works for videos as well. And then right at the end here, I just had it set to reset to the starting image so that we can have the full loop of things. And you see that I did actually indeed automate all of these automation clips. I set all these automation clips. You can't really see that there's much of a difference. So that is why you're definitely going to want to make sure you're copying the value of the image source, or you're copying the position, or copying the selected image source, which no matter what, it's going to say copy value in ZGameEditor Visualizer. So make sure you go to your image source, right-click, copy value, and then paste it in your automation clip so that you can get the effect that you want. So then there you go. So again, if you wanted to create this slideshow type effect, what you're going to want to do is whenever you're setting up your automation clips for your transition effects, you're going to want to obviously automate the transition slider for your transition effect. And you're going to want to have, whatever automation curve you want for the initial animation of the transition effect. But then once it reaches its endpoint, just immediately snap back to the starting point of the automation so that you can get that instant transition back to the start. Then for each image source that you want, you're going to want to change the image source for the background image and for the transition effect image by setting the image first in the drop-down menu, right-clicking on the drop-down menu for the image source, copying the value, and then pasting it where its appropriate point will be. It's going to take a little bit of concentration, as you just saw. It took me, like I said, way longer to figure out where I wanted it to be, especially because since these increments are so minuscule, if you accidentally like twitch your hand even slightly while pasting the while right-clicking the point and pasting your automation clip, it's probably going to mess up and it's probably going to confuse you a bit. So definitely just make sure you're paying attention to which image you're setting. You're going to click your image source, set it, right-click, copy value, and then paste it where you want it to be, so that is where that image is. We're not going to see a transition effect right now because it's the same image, but that way you can make sure that you have the image you selected. I hope that was helpful. It's a little confusing, a little short video for this effect, but someone wanted to see how I did that specifically, mainly because the custom image index is the name of the parameter that is the image source right here, the custom image index. Because the increment is so small, it was harder to understand, I guess, how to set the image. I think because the image source is expecting this entire page to be filled, so the increments are incredibly small, as opposed to I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images loaded in. It should fill out as you would think, increments of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like that. But apparently it doesn't do that. So just be wary of that. If you want to use this effect, make sure you're copying and pasting the position of the image, the custom image index, into your automation clips so that it can be accurate in your effect. Make sure you have the automation curve set to hold. Otherwise, you will get some weird flickering. If your images aren't in order, because the way that I did it technically are in order. If you wanted to jump around your images, if you have it set to pretty much any other automation curve other than hold, you will get just the weird flickering of images as it's moving around. So you're going to want to make sure absolutely that you have it set to hold. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can really talk about. I mean, I guess other things to know about this effect, because I don't think I covered this in too much detail in the original tutorial series, because there's really not much to this effect. As you can see, there's transition type, transition, edge hardness, and then two sliders that say null until you are in the correct transition type. So I guess if you want to see what those do, I can show you real quick. I'm going to copy this value, make sure that's set back to the correct one. Go back over here. Alright, so your transition types are your general transition types. You have the swipe horizontal, which is the one you've been seeing, which is just the basic, swipe. Then you also have your vertical swipe as well. If you wanted to, you can change the edge hardness, which just indicates this little median section here. If you want it to be an incredible blur, you can have it. Well, you can have it set to way wider than I think would be. Oh, if you set it to that, you can just have a blur transition. Actually, that's pretty cool. A blur cross dissolve. Or if you wanted it to be a much sharper transition, you can have it set to all the way to the right, and that's pretty much just a sharp line between the two images, and you have that type of transition. You also have your pinstripe transition, which if you set it to pinstripe, you see that you have these two options now. You have the rotation and you have the zoom level. Go set it to something like that. And presumably you could also automate these as well if you wanted a moving transition. You can set it like this, something like that, you know. Same thing with circular. You have circular, you have your X offset and Y offset for these parameters instead. And that just, I assume, pretty much just means you're gonna change the edge hardness. Well, pretty much where the circle originates from. Yes, I made it the paw, of course. Yeah. Leading with the paw. I'm gonna set this automation curve for something different. I'm gonna set it to half sine, because why not? But yeah, and then you have crossfade, which I guess you don't need to use that other thing for crossfade because you just have crossfade right here. There you go, you just have crossfade. And then star swipe, which is of course your little star looking one. This one as well, you can probably have like a little automation clip for your rotation set right here. Probably want to make sure that it is, if you hold Alt and move your point, you can make sure that it's not snapped to the grid so that you can get a more accurate position to what you want. Just set as half sine. I really like the half sine one. I don't know why. Yeah, there you go. And then can I change the edge hardness as this? No, I can't change the edge hardness. That becomes the rotation one instead, and then I can change the position as well again. Or additionally, one final point, if you wanted to, now that I'm doing this with the paw here, you can do the classic like cartoon movie outro if you wanted to. You could just have it fade out, you know, fade out to a black screen. Because if you have it set to none, this transition or this transition effects image source to none, copy that and then set that to here, you'll see that the transition will then become, never mind, this one right here. That's what I meant to do. You see that it's that. So that if I, oh, you know what? I think I have to automate this the other way. But since that starts from small to big, what I would want to do is set this to the image that we have set, which is this one, and then instead set the background to a black image. So if I set that to none, unfortunately, that's gonna not work the correct way. So I might just want actually, whoops, I might just want to actually do something like this. Just have a background solid color set to black as a buffer layer, and then set that to output from C. That's not black, that's black. And then there you go. And then if I copy that, set that as the background here, so that whenever I do the transition out, I think it's still doing the same image. There you go. Oh yeah, but then you're gonna want to make sure that you flip the transition effect. So whoops, so I forgot to flip the transition effect. So what we're gonna want to do is we are going to, since it's starting at the end of the transition, unfortunately, we're going to want to start with the image that we want, set that right there, and then end on the black image. That's the wrong one, but it's the same image, so it doesn't matter. Just set that like that, and then same thing with this here. You're going to want to start on this image and then transition to the... doing it backwards is a bit harder to try to figure out because we're transitioning from that to the background image. So the background does need to start off as the black background. There we go. And then we just have the rotation automation here. There you go, and you can do your little cartoony fade out right there. Oof, that was a bit tricky to try to figure out. I don't know why that took so long to try to figure out. But yeah, so there you go. So if you wanted to use your transition effects as a clever, I guess, more comedic fade out, you could do it like that. Have your solid color background as a buffer layer and set that as your image source for your background and transition effects layer. But that's probably a bit more complicated because you saw how long it took me to figure that out. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have more questions, leave them in the comments below. And hopefully this answered anyone's questions regarding the transition effects effect in ZGameEditor Visualizer. Oh, and real quick, let me show you what happens if you load in an image that doesn't match the aspect ratio of your video. So I'm going to use the, I'll switch between the two. Since I already have the HUD image layer loaded in, I'm going to use the HUD image layer first. We're going to go ahead and select this picture I have here, or this GIF I should say that I have here. You can see the aspect ratio, it's a square image. If I change the scale, I can get it to the correct size if I wanted to, but the main problem is if I were to start off with this picture and I wanted to transition into that picture, you will actually notice a little problem here. That is what that looks like in the transition effects. It looks pretty stretched out, right? And then if I wanted to solidify that as the one, that's what it looks like. So what you would probably want to do is you would probably want to load your image in and it looks the same with the HUD image or the regular image layer as well, pretty sure. Transition looking weird. Oh, except that looks like that for some reason. Hang on. And then just snaps back there. But the only problem is if you're using the image layer, you can't actually scale it up. Though you could change the width and height and then scale it down, but I prefer using HUD image layer because it's much easier to work with. Anyways, so if you have your image loaded in as your HUD image layer, and then if you scale it here, all right, there you go. That's the correct scale that I want it to be. Let me just make sure. Oh, it's a bit smaller. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there are some slight white lines on the side of whenever I press. If you haven't seen the tutorial video, there is a show transparency button here, and if you do that, this pops up on the back. So those white lines mean that I didn't actually have it set all the way to the correct size. So I can hold control, make sure I get it the right size. That's about right there, I think. Okay, so then I'm going to set this. I'm going to rename this to wave, sure, and then set that to buffer. So now that that's in the buffer layer, I can actually use that specific image instead of the unscaled version wherever I want to. So I see if I put that like that, that is the one that I'm using. So we're going to start with this image and we're going to transition into that layer. And just to make sure that I've done that correctly, I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to initialize the image source position as that one so we can make sure that the transition effect works appropriately. See, there you go. So that's a quick way to fix, to work around if you have an image that is the incorrect aspect ratio. If you have one that's a larger image or a larger size than your resolution, I guess, you could use the regular image and scale it down from there and then do the same thing. Just have it set as a buffer layer and then import the image into your image source. That is another way to do that as well. But yeah, hopefully that helps with that issue as well. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Ulrich, aka DayMusic, and I will see you all next time.